Hi everyone, welcome to the Butcher's Word. My name is Bill and I'm going to be your butcher. Today we're going to be learning how to trim and tie a whole beef tenderloin roast. If you are like my family and I, we like to celebrate special occasions such as Mom's birthday by cooking a beautiful whole beef tenderloin roast. A problem that a lot of people run into is if they go to a grocery store or if you go to a place like Costco, which we love, and you pick up a beef tenderloin roast, you're going to get it like this, where it is not trimmed, okay? And you're going to be like, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I do it? And you're going to pay a lot more per pound if you get one trimmed and tied at a butcher shop. So this is just a good way to kind of use your knife skills, save some money, and take a little pride in making your own beautiful roast. I'll pick a few tenderloins up and I will hold it like this to see how floppy it is. How flaccid is your meat. If it holds together like this.
Okay, pause. After running this through a few focus groups, one of the big concerns that was mentioned was that I wasn't really clear whether or not this was indeed a stiff tendy or a floppy tendy, and I'm going to set the record straight. This is a stiff tendy. When I say floppy tendy, I mean like it's going to drape over your arm and be thin and squishy, like no structural integrity whatsoever. So remember, this is the most tender muscle on the entire animal, so it's going to have a little give. And don't forget about what your old grandpap used to say. The stiffer the meat, the better you eat. Hey, you know what I'm saying?
All right, before we get started, you're going to need a few things. Make sure you obviously have a nice cutting board. I like to put a towel underneath it, a wet paper towel or a wet towel, kitchen cloth, whatever, so it doesn't slide around. Most people don't have your standard professional butcher knife. This is a 6-inch boning knife. If you don't have that, which most people don't, you probably have your kind of standard knife set, knife block, and in that you're going to have a slicer, or some of them come with this nice fillet knife. This is Wusthof, is the brand that my parents have, and use these. Okay, do not use a chef's knife. The other thing that you're going to need is this butcher twine. Okay, so first when you're taking your roast out of the cryovac bag that it's in, you're going to notice all this like red juice floating around, or blood. Some people think it's blood. It's not blood. It's a protein called myoglobin, and it's totally safe and normal. In the industry they call it purge, but it can be messy. So what I like to do is I pop it from the top here, and then that'll pull the meat away from the cryovac bag so you don't dig into the roast, and hold it over your sink. And then once you've got that, you can kind of get into it, grab the roast, and just pull this thing off, like so. And any of that residual juice and anything that spills is just going to go in your.
Alright, so here we have our beautiful roast. You're going to see the chain is here. That's where we're going to get our fingers in there and remove it. You've got some extra connective tissue and fat on top, and we're going to take that off with our fingers, and you get to the silver skin there, which we'll remove with a knife. There's a chain on the bottom side, a little extra silver skin, and these are some fat knobs that we're going to remove. This is the butt end of the tenderloin. This is the tail of the tenderloin. And this beautiful piece in the middle here is your barrel cut or Chateaubriand.
Okay, so let's start by taking off the chain here first. You don't need your knife for this at all, okay? All you're going to do is get your finger underneath here and just start pulling. See how all that comes up? A lot of people think that you need a bandsaw and the sharpest knives in the world to do butchery, and honestly, most of it is just setting yourself up to make a few small cuts with a knife. So here we are, we've pulled the chain off. As you can tell from my reaction, the overhead camera was not filming on that last take, so we're going to do a quick reenactment here. Use your thumb to get underneath the connective tissue and proceed to pull the chain off as much as possible. Grab your knife, follow the seam. The chain actually connects to the butt tender, and you can remove this whole thing for different applications, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to cut the chain off here. My dad and I like to cut this up and cook it as a little pre-meal snack. Now you can go further, cut there if you want, but it's up to you. Now that we've got the chain off, we're going to remove some of this extra connective tissue and do some general housekeeping. And then it's time to flip this bad boy over. Okay, so what we're going to do first is take our knife and trim off the fat knobs that are on the back of the tenderloin. It's pretty simple to do. Just use the edge of your knife to kind of shave them off until you get to where it's mostly red. Now I'm going to show you the proper way to trim the silver skin off of your beef tenderloin. Start with your knife here down at the butt end, and you want to get underneath the silver skin and just push towards the tail. Don't saw at it, just gently glide your knife. But that's not what you're going to see here. I guess the bright lights of the cameras went straight to my head, and I decided to start this thing from the opposite angle. Anyhow, get underneath the silver skin, and you can hold on to it like you're skinning a fish and use it to keep the roast from sliding around. There's a little extra meat on it, it's not that big of a deal. Here I'm going towards the butt end of the tender, and the silver skin there actually goes down kind of in a V form. So I'm going to start by taking some of it off the top there, and then kind of cleaning up the rest down by the tail here. Okay, now we're going to finish taking out that silver skin that's on the butt end of the tenderloin. Basically cut down like a V until you get underneath it all, and you can kind of just peel it off the back of the butt end. So you can see here that we pulled all the silver skin out of there, and it'll tie up just fine when we tie the roast. There is some silver skin left on the back underside of it, so we're going to just trim that off. The last thing that we're going to do before we tie the roast is to fold the tail over. This is to help it cook evenly. You only need to tuck about 3 inches underneath. Not that much, you wise guy. Now everything is relatively uniform, and we can move on to tying your tendy. Alright, I'm going to call this our loose end, which you're going to tuck underneath the tendy towards your belly. And this, our twine end, which will go over the top. I'm doing this right-handed, so I apologize to all the southpaws out there. Make sure that you have enough twine to work with. Put the twine end in your left hand with your fingers extended and palm facing up. Put the loose end in your right hand closely to your fingertips. This next move is called the flux capacitor. Wrap the loose end underneath your left fingers while simultaneously rotating your left hand from being palm up to palm down. Next, grab the loose end from your left hand and pull it through the loop you've created. Now move your free right hand to hold the twine end firm while simultaneously pulling on the loose end. This will create a type of slip knot. Great band, by the way. Now that our butcher knot has been made, pull on the twine end while holding the roast in place. This will tighten the loop around the roast. There's no need to pull as tight as possible. Doing that will tear into the meat. Simply apply enough pressure so that it's snug. Finally, take the remainder of the loose end and tie 2 simple knots to lock it in place, and then cut the excess loose twine off with your knife. We have now successfully made our anchor and can progress to the next steps. It's all downhill from here, so take a deep breath and relax. Okay, so this is a neat trick that I've learned. Place the twine over your fingers with your palm facing up and make exactly 3 loops.
Take the loop and place it around the butt end of the tenderloin. Wiggle the twine down so that your next loop will be 2 to 3 inches away from the previous loop. Once you're lined up, tighten the loop in the same manner you did the first one. Not too tight and not too loose. Now rinse and repeat. So during the holidays, most butcher shops receive orders for thousands of these tenderloin roasts, and a good time-saving technique that I was taught was to simply cut and tie 2 loops around the tail end, and then cut and tie 2 loops around the butt end. You don't have to go through the process of tying knots around the barrel cut part of it, because it's really consistent the whole way through. However, I think it looks nicer, and I'm willing to take a little more time to do something that looks nicer for Mother's birthday. Alright, once your final loop has been made, you're going to cut the twine from the spool and tie a few simple knots like we did on the tail end, just so the twine doesn't come loose. Make sure you leave yourself enough twine to do this. 6 inches or so should be enough. And there you have it, your beautiful finished tied roast. I trimmed up the meatier parts of the chain and will cook it off as a little snack. My parents like to season their tenderloin with a slurry of fresh thyme, rosemary, garlic, kosher salt, black pepper, and of course, olive oil. Slather this hog up, and don't forget about your little chain parts either. I like to sear the roast on all sides over medium-high heat. I usually do this 1 to 2 hours ahead of time and then let it rest. Don't forget your little chain parts. Once serving time is approaching, I will set the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, place a probe in the center of the roast, and set it for 130 degrees. One thing to note is that the roast will continue to cook and the internal temp will increase up to 5 degrees after you pull it out. Once internal temperature is reached, pull the roast out and let it rest for 10 minutes. Now that our roast has gotten its beauty rest, it's time to slice and serve. This turned out perfectly and was enjoyed by everyone, including Mom. This is the first video I've ever done, and I can tell you that filming was hard, but editing it was way harder. I want to thank everyone who's supported me so far, and if you'd like to do so as well, click the subscribe button below and join me on my journey to educate and empower consumers. It's so easy to source and prepare the food you want, how you want to, if you just take the butcher's word for it.